Good Monday, everyone, and thank you for joining me for episode 37 of the Southern Conservative Podcast. My name is Ty. The Southern Conservative has not been hard-pressed for news. We have not had any slow news days, so let's start from where we left off last week. I had summarized for you the major characters involved in the different scandals going on in Washington. People like James Comey, and how he factors into the Hillary Clinton investigation, approving the Christopher Steele dossier and using it to obtain FISA warrants to go after Carter Page, and investigating the larger Trump campaign in terms of collusion with Russia. And now Comey is going to hit the left-wing mainstream media circuit promoting his new book. What Comey should be worried about is what is going to be coming out soon in the DOJ Inspector General's report on the Hillary Clinton investigation and congressional investigations into leaks of classified information, which includes Comey's leaks of memos to the New York Times via a Columbia law professor. You have Andrew McCabe, who was recently fired from the FBI for making false statements and unauthorized leaks to the Wall Street Journal. We know he was close to Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who texted practically non-stop to each other. And we know Peter Strzok's role in the Hillary investigation, his role in starting up the Trump investigation, and his role in interviewing Michael Flynn. And he was called up by Robert Mueller to be part of the special counsel. Speaking of the special counsel, I've talked about Andrew Weissmann and his ruthless tactics to secure convictions. Sarah Carter wrote a very nice article about Weissmann failing to disclose that a witness was an FBI informant in an organized crime case that he tried back in 1997. That informant, by the way, was himself involved in organized crime, including murder. And don't forget about the roles of Susan Rice, Obama's national security advisor, and top intelligence officials, including James Clapper and John Brennan. Rice wrote an email to herself on the last day of the Obama administration, summarizing a meeting that took place 15 days prior. In that meeting, the president supposedly remarked he wanted the investigations done by the book, and told James Comey that there may be a need to withhold information from the incoming administration. In other words, Trump's administration. James Clapper leaked the dossier to CNN, and now he's a contributor for CNN. John Brennan leaked the dossier to Democratic lawmakers on Capitol Hill. What is amazing about these two men, Clapper as Director of National Intelligence and Brennan as CIA Director, they're supposed to be neutral. They're supposed to be apolitical. But clearly, they were spreading a dossier that to this day has still not been verified. They wanted to push the dossier to lawmakers and the media, who would scream for further investigations into Donald Trump. And at the DOJ, we know that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein signed off on at least one FISA application. He too was responsible for making sure that what he signed off on was accurate and contained information that had been verified. And we know that that did not happen. So it's no wonder why Rosenstein has been stonewalling congressional investigators when it comes to allowing them access to documents. I believe Rosenstein is afraid that Congress could be investigating him, or information about Rosenstein could be uncovered. At any rate, we know that we eventually got to the special counsel, and we really have yet to discuss who Robert Mueller is, other than the fact that he is a former FBI director. In fact, he was the FBI director at the time the Uranium One deal was being approved. And it turns out, Weissmann and Mueller have been friends for a very long time, and it's no wonder that Weissmann would be part of the special counsel team. According to Sarah Carter, Weissmann, described by the New York Times as Mueller's pit bull, was Mueller's legal advisor for national security in 2005, and later was selected by Mueller to be his general counsel at the FBI. It made sense for Mueller, who left his $3.4 million a year job at the top D.C. law firm WilmerHale to bring Weissmann with him to the special counsel team to investigate President Trump and his alleged collusion with Russia in the 2016 election. Weissmann, a specialist in tracking financing and corruption, was at the time head of the Department of Justice's criminal fraud section. Mueller saw nobody better than Weissmann to help navigate the murky waters of the investigation and Weissmann was lauded by some and criticized by others for doing whatever it took to win a case, as reported. Mueller was also aware of critical issues with Weissmann's handling of the Enron and Arthur Andersen cases, as well as his involvement in the Eastern District of New York's case against the Columbo crime family. Weissmann's involvement in the Columbo case in the 1990s was the first of many cases that would draw criticism from his peers, but this case in particular would be one of the FBI's biggest blunders. Judge Charles P. Sifton reprimanded Weissmann for withholding evidence from the defense, as previously reported. Weissmann allowed a corrupt FBI agent to testify against the defendants in the case, despite having knowledge that the agent was under investigation. The agent had a nefarious relationship with a reputed underboss of the Columbo crime family, who was accused later of numerous murders, court records reveal. Mueller had similar troubles during the 1980s in Boston, when he was acting U.S. attorney from 1986 through 1987. Under Mueller's watch in Boston, another one of the FBI's most scandalous cases occurred. At the time, an FBI agent by the name of John Connolly, who is now in prison for murder-related charges, had been the handler for James Whitey Bulger. Bulger, who Connolly aided in escaping FBI custody in the 90s, was a notorious mobster and murderer who had been working as a confidential informant for the FBI against other crime syndicates in the Boston area. Mueller, who oversaw the FBI during his time there, was criticized by the media and congressional members for how the situation in Boston was handled. Bulger, who committed numerous murders during his time as an informant, disappeared for more than 16 years until he was finally captured in California in 2011. By that time, Mueller was the director of the FBI. But there's more. In 1965, 4 men were convicted for the murder of Edward Deegan that the FBI later learned they did not commit. 3 of the men faced death sentences. The FBI had learned, during the time Bulger was an informant, that the men did not commit the murders. The men served decades in prison, and 2 of them died in prison. A jury trial revealed that the FBI had known the men were innocent, but withheld evidence from state law enforcement authorities. In 2007, a jury awarded more than $101 million in damages to the surviving men and their families. However, during the time the men were in prison, Mueller wrote multiple letters to the Parole and Pardons Board opposing clemency for the 4 men. Mueller never answered questions as to what he knew about the case or if he was aware of the men's innocence, as reported extensively by Kevin Cullen, a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer for the Boston Globe. In 2013, Bulger went on trial for 32 counts of racketeering, money laundering, and extortion. He was also indicted on weapons charges and 19 counts of murder. The bottom line, there were several missteps in the Whitey Bulger case at a time when Mueller was overseeing that case. Not only did John Connolly, an FBI agent, help Bulger escape FBI custody, Mueller withheld evidence that 4 men who were convicted of a 1965 murder did not actually commit murder. And 2 of those men wound up dying in prison, and the government had to give a huge payout to the survivors. Given Mueller's history, how can we be sure Mueller will conduct a fair and unbiased investigation into Trump-Russia collusion? Well, from what we've seen, the investigation has been anything but fair. Mueller is going after Paul Manafort for things he did totally unrelated to the campaign. Mueller went after Michael Flynn and had Flynn plead guilty to lying to the FBI, even though Comey and Strzok both felt Flynn had not lied to the FBI in a January 2017 interview. All of this, of course, is to get people to talk in an effort to go after Trump. But Mueller has made an indictment when it comes to collusion. But it was an indictment of Russians and Russian companies. An official statement given by Rod Rosenstein mentioned that no American knowingly participated in Russian activities, so no American colluded with Russia, and this would include Donald Trump. And yet, the special counsel's investigation continues. And Mueller would like to talk to Trump, and for some reason, Trump seems willing to want to talk with Mueller. Trump needs to realize that Mueller is still trying to bring some charge against Trump, even if that means bringing a process crime like obstruction of justice or perjury. So Trump needs to be very, very careful if he is going to talk to Mueller. There is some news on the foreign policy front. Donald Trump announced today he is expelling Russian diplomats from the United States after the UK government announced a nerve agent tied to Russia was used against 2 Russian spies in Britain. The president also announced the Russian consulate would be closed in Seattle due to its proximity to a submarine base. That's a good thing. We can't have countries using chemical weapons like this. And about the entire European continent has been standing with the UK against Russia for this. Then later on, China announced it does not want a trade war with the United States, and the stock market took off so much that this was the largest single-day point jump in the Dow since 2008. Now, as I've said, I was opposed to Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs. Tariffs are not conservative ideas. They are populist ideas. However, Trump has scaled back the countries that would be affected by these tariffs, and I believe eventually they'll be scaled back to the point where only China is affected. China is unique in its position in the global economy, in that it doesn't play by the same rules as all other countries do. They have devalued their currency, they steal our intellectual property, and have been getting away with it for years. But remember, China depends on the United States in a huge way. We are a major importer of Chinese products. China is very dependent on exporting goods to the United States. So China doesn't want a trade war just as much as the United States doesn't want a trade war. Again, blanket tariffs are a bad thing, a very bad thing. It helps to prop up an industry while other industries and American consumers suffer from higher priced goods. But now, China is willing to make a deal with the United States. Couple this with the deal Trump wants to make with North Korea concerning nuclear weapons. If we're able to have fair trade with China, this would be huge for our economy. And if Trump can denuclearize the Korean Peninsula and maybe finally have an official end to the Korean War, that would be huge when it comes to American national security. Remember, there never was an official end to the Korean War in 1953, just an armistice. So there's a lot happening on the world stage that the left-wing media is not reporting. They only want to talk about Stormy Daniels. I'm not going to talk about Stormy Daniels. I think it's a whole lot of nothing other than a major distraction for Donald Trump. Look, I don't condone having extramarital affairs, but this was a consensual act with a man who was nowhere involved in politics at the time. This still pales in comparison to Bill Clinton, who allegedly raped Juanita Broaddrick and was having sexual relations with a White House intern while he was president of the United States, and he lied about it to the American people and then had to go before the American people and say he lied about it. Anyway, if you haven't checked out my Facebook page, please do so. Go to facebook.com/southernconservative. That's facebook.com/southernconservative. There you will find links to conservative news articles on stories you may not hear about in the mainstream media. Plus, if you follow the news feed, you'll find links to the daily podcast. Be sure to also subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll be alerted each time a new podcast has been posted. New podcasts are posted daily, Monday through Thursday. And as a reminder, there will not be a podcast on Tuesday tomorrow. I want to make some brief comments on the March for Our Lives rally that took place in Washington on Saturday. First, I'll start out with some positive comments. I have to applaud the level of organization here. To get that many young people to come out and protest what they feel are threats to their security at school is absolutely amazing. If young people want to get together and assemble, they certainly can do so, as long as it's in a peaceful manner and does not infringe on others who also want to assemble. Now that's about all the good things I have to say about this. You know, March for Our Lives, you would think it would be a rally focusing on what our politicians can do to help make schools and other public places safer for everyone. But as the headline in the Sunday morning local paper where I'm at in Maryland now, it was deemed a gun control rally, and that's pretty accurate given the speeches that were made. And a gun control rally is very different than a March for Our Lives rally. And that's because a gun control rally is only focused on one portion of what could be done to protect lives. even though we have seen time and time again that gun control does not do anything to protect lives. It merely infringes upon the rights of law-abiding Americans. And when you turn this into a gun control rally, you exclude the points of view of those who feel additional guns in schools would be a great way to stop gun violence. Look at the wall-to-wall coverage of the Parkland school shooting, and yet you hear nothing about the recent school shooting in southern Maryland, in which a school resource officer used his gun to stop a school shooter from doing more harm. A girl who was shot in that case was taken off life support and has died, and our thoughts and prayers are with her family. But this officer's actions allowed the school shooter to be stopped, unlike the actions of the officer in Parkland, Florida, who remained outside the entire time the shooting occurred. We didn't see any protests against the Broward County Sheriff's Department or Sheriff Israel for failing to take responsibility and for failing to keep tabs on Nicholas Cruz when it was apparent he wanted to be a school shooter, and it was believed he wanted to commit gun violence. We didn't see outrage against the sheriff. We saw outrage against the NRA. So what is all of this doing? Well, by turning this into a gun control rally, it has the appearance that all these young people want to do is to prevent people from having access to guns, and not just those with certain mental illnesses that makes them more likely to commit crimes. When it appears that there are those who want to take away your guns, you have a pushback from gun owners, members of the NRA, and others who believe in the Second Amendment. In fact, the NRA announced they are seeing a spike in new memberships as a result of gun control rhetoric. As I've said before, having armed people in schools who can neutralize shooters when shootings begin is the way to go. But it's more than that. It's about making sure entrances are secure, backpacks are searched, IDs are checked, and so on. Make it impossible for guns to make their way into school buildings, the same way we prevent guns from getting inside government buildings, stadiums, arenas, and so forth. When I hear there are districts who do not want armed personnel in schools, I cringe, and maybe not for the reasons you expect. I cringe because these districts are announcing their schools will be essentially gun-free zones. And when you broadcast that to the world, you're setting your schools up to be targets. If you have someone wanting to shoot up a school, is that person more likely to enter a school with known armed personnel, or a school where a person will know it's a gun-free zone? I think the answer is pretty clear. I would hate to see schools become potential targets of the next school shooter. Well, folks, that will do it for today. There will not be a podcast on Tuesday, so I'll be back on Wednesday with another podcast. Have a great day, everybody.